The Trump administration just wrapped up its questioning before the Supreme Court. So now we are hearing from Lisa Cook's side. And I have to say, so far, our own analysis is showing that at the minimum, there are these conservative justices appointed by President Trump that are showing skepticism against the White House's argument when it comes to what they are seeking here, which is known as a stay for a preliminary injunction. You outlined it there. They're essentially trying to remove Lisa Cook for now while the broader issue of her case plays out in court. And while this is basically a temporary matter, really, it does have longer term implications ultimately about whether or not Lisa Cook would keep her job, because the justices here are looking at the same core tenets over her firing. Now, with that said, we should caution that once we hear Lisa Cook's lawyers be questioned by the high court, that could, of course, change perhaps the dynamic. So it's a little too early to say which way they're leaning. But really at the center of this is that the justices are asking questions around three main items. One, did President Trump have sufficient cause to fire Cook under Section 10 of the Federal Reserve Act? The president needs to have cause, but it's not explicitly defined. It's typically meant to mean malfeasance or neglect of duties related to the job, and the mortgage fraud allegations happened before Lisa Cook ultimately came to her position. So that's one line of questioning that we've really seen from the court. The second has to do with due process, but the third is a really important one that I wanted to highlight, which is that the Supreme Court is looking into what's known as the equities of the case, which means the ripple effects. What would this mean for the markets, for the economy, for central bank independence? And Paul and Scarlett, we just heard from Brett Kavanaugh, a conservative justice on the court, who said he's thinking about the, quote, real world downstream effects that any sort of precedent would set. That has led us to believe that there could be some skepticism from his side of the court on the Trump administration's argument. And
so certainly, Tyler, there are some concerns by many that this case has broader implications, potentially opening a path for President Trump to remove Fed Chair Jerome Powell and other governors who haven't necessarily been as supportive of a lower rate environment. How is that being expressed or raised by any of the justices here, or the arguments?
Right. That is a really key part of this that goes back to this idea that they are looking at the ripple effects. So when they ultimately issue their decision, which likely is not going to be today, it could actually take months for this to happen. They could, have one feeling about whether or not President Trump has cause, but they could have another feeling about whether or not this is going to significantly impact the markets and the economy, and ultimately how the Fed operates as what they have previously outlined is a quasi-private entity that has control over monetary policy. Now, in his remarks, Kavanaugh said that, quote, history is a pretty good guide, and once these tools are unleashed, they are used by both sides, and usually more the second time around, showing that there is some skepticism here when it comes to what sort of down the road impacts this could have. Now, it is our understanding that Jerome Powell is inside the courtroom in what is considered to be an unprecedented show of support after we've really seen escalations reach a boiling point, or over the boiling point this last week, after it was confirmed that the Department of Justice had subpoenaed the Federal Reserve over allegations against Powell when it comes to cost overruns to the Fed's headquarters here in Washington.
Yeah, the stakes are definitely higher, and Jerome Powell's presence there did elicit some criticism from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. We should add as well that you mentioned there won't likely be a decision today. It could be months. Is there only one day of hearings, or does this continue for another day? I'm wondering how much they can pack into this one day.
There's going to be a lot packed into this one day. So we've already heard from the Trump administration side. Now we're going to be hearing from Lisa Cook's side, and then the Trump administration, the Solicitor General is going to have a chance for rebuttals. And then the Supreme Court is going to take its time perhaps and think about what it's going to do next. Now, I will say that we've already started to hear some arguments from some of the justices that the administration has asked for this to be done on an expedited manner, and they are asking, why does this need to happen on such a quick schedule? And that's going to be something really interesting to watch, because we know that the administration has some other cases that are brewing in front of the Supreme Court, including when it comes to removing other officials of independent agencies like the FTC. So they're all sort of dovetailing together. And at this point, it's anyone's guess on how quickly the Supreme Court is going to rule. But Scarlett, it continues what has been a trend from this administration to ask for expedited rulings. Take the tariff case, for example. The White House has asked the Supreme Court to rule expeditiously, to prioritize a decision when it comes to his use of tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And we still haven't gotten that decision yet either.